Welcome back to part 2 of my Truman Show essay series, where we examine the social and cultural aspects of the Truman Show that still make it relevant to this day, if not more. For those of you who haven't watched part 1 yet, I will leave a link in the description below. Today's video will be about the effect of consumerism on Truman and the media in general. Now, just saying that out loud makes me nervous because that is quite the topic to have to deal with. However, I will try my best to make sure today's video is both informative and entertaining. Because this is such a large topic, I will be talking more about how the consumerism present in the film relates to our world as a whole than to the characters in the film. With all that being said, let's dive right into it. Consumerism is, by definition, an economic theory which states that a progressively greater level of consumption is beneficial to the consumers. Of all the countries in the world, the United States has the largest consumer market. This means, at its very simplest, that we're the country with the most citizens buying things for personal use. This statement is very controversial and leads to many polarized opinions on the matter. The best way to understand something is to understand its history and how it got to where it is today. Compiling the state of the world today in terms of the history of consumerism and advertising would be extremely long and arduous, so I will try to summarize it in the most appropriate way possible. While the rise of American consumerism can be attributed to many different periods in history, such as the Industrial Revolution, the Roaring Twenties, and World War II, they definitely weren't the start of its core principles. Consumerism and advertising go hand in hand with each other, and a consumerist society cannot exist without advertisements for said products that are being consumed. The act of advertising has been around since early history, with evidence of advertising tactics used in Egyptian and Roman civilizations. In comes the creation of the printing press and the newspaper, and by the 19th century, advertisements were a staple of the medium. This occurred around the same time as the American Industrial Revolution, in which new and improved knowledge and technology gave rise to a better economy, better manufacturing practices, and a better way of living overall. This led to the ability to mass-produce items for consumption by an audience that could now afford said items. This, in turn, led to a melding together of corporate advertising and public consumption that proved fruitful for the US economy. After, and because of World War I, this cycle would just get even more intense with the keeping up with the Joneses mentality and prosperity of the Roaring Twenties. Enter the Great Depression, in which this cycle would begin causing devastation rather than economic prosperity. After the Wall Street crash of 1929, Americans began buying less items, which led to less items produced, which led to less employment, etc. This is, of course, a massive oversimplification of one of the worst economic disasters of our time, but it'll do for now. There were many things that played a role in undoing this depression, but one of the more common theories is the start of World War II. Through government spending on the war, the United States revived the economy and reduced unemployment. This led to a return to form for the consumer market, particularly with emphasis on the war. Advertisements for consumer products and war bonds encouraged spending in honor of the war and in favor of the economy. From here, advertising and consumerism blossomed together, hand in hand. Television began using advertisements on July 1, 1941, joining the radio and the newspaper as forms of media with slots for sponsorship. Television advertising throughout the next several decades would play a large part in mimicking the mentality of consumerism. Advertisements became shorter in order to accommodate the shrinking attention span of Americans. TV shows themselves became shorter so that we could squeeze more advertisements in. Meanwhile, consumer spending quickly grew with the country's inflation rate. Every opportunity to capitalize on spending was taken and built upon. So, at this point, if you haven't hit the dislike button, you're probably wondering how this information is relevant to the Truman Show. Well, in case I haven't made it clear, we live in a consumerist society. As a country, our newspapers, radios, televisions, and even wars are sponsored. Almost all major events in modern American history involved either a cause or effect of positive or negative financial influence. Our lives are driven by the things we buy. Our reality is created by the things we invest ourselves in, both metaphorically and financially, and oftentimes our reality is manipulated in order to benefit the producer of the product. Advertisements are often geared towards something striking and personal that we can look at and think, I relate to that. That is something I would do, therefore I want it. Producers have long stopped selling products and have begun to sell ideas that those products convey. They manipulate people into thinking they're doing what's best for them, when in reality to the producer, a consumer isn't a human, just a product buyer. In the same way, Truman is being manipulated. While he lives a great, happy life, he is actually being used by everyone around him. In particular, he is being used by Christoph. Christoph is the producer of a product, the product being Truman. The concept of Truman, the everyday man living the perfect everyday life, is an image Christoph carefully creates and tries to sell. Truman is the Jones that everyone is trying to keep up with. Truman is manipulated for Christoph's own financial and social benefit. He undergoes many tragedies in the world he lives in, from having his college love taken away from him, to having his dad taken away from him, to almost being drowned in a sea storm. This is Truman's life. He's never known anything but this. But to those on the outside, they're just watching television. And although they appear very invested, the Truman merchandise and quick disinterest upon Truman's exit show that he was never really much more to them than that. Merchandise and a show. In fact, many times throughout the film, Truman is used to sell a product that he actually has no use for. Or in better words, the concept of Truman as the everyday man is used to manipulate even more people into thinking they need to buy certain things in order to be everyday people themselves. While the Truman Show may seem genuine and filled with heart on the surface, it is really a vessel to bridge the gap between the cold world of consumerism and the warm feelings of living a wholesome life. This is also an example of how quickly everything falls apart when an important and highly valued asset does something unexpected. Truman's value was solely financial to the people who created him, and because of this, his unexpected leaving left and will continue to leave dire consequences on their end. Because, you see, as humans, we expect everything to remain constant. Financial security, Truman's life, these things were expected to stay the same so that we could reap the benefits of them. But things don't remain constant, and that's an important thing to remember in the modern day. Oftentimes we think that we as consumers have no control over the things producers make, but that's not true. The consumer demands from the producer, not the other way around. We don't have to remain constant. Be like Truman and get out from under the thumb of those trying to make you a product. Stay tuned for the next part, which will probably be in a few weeks, but maybe not. These things usually take longer than I expect. We'll see. Anyways, thanks for watching. Have a great day.